co-host, Christy Brower.
Hey, everybody.
Co-anchor, I guess that works.
Sure, why not? We're kind of a news story show, aren't we?
Well, yeah, we'll
Kind of.
take it. We are glad to be here. We've got a really interesting case. A lot of what we have done thus far has been more true crimey than it has been paranormal, and of course we just do a psychic analysis of all of those stories, which is perfect. But this is a true paranormal case that, and it's kind of fun, you guys, because typically we both research a case, but we're actually going to record 2 podcasts today. And so Christy's been knee deep into one of them and I've been knee deep into the other one. And so I think it's kind of fun today that she knows nothing about this case. So we're going to really get to,
So I'm going to cold read it. Woo!
Yeah. We're going to really flex her psychic muscles in this one. This is just a really interesting one. So before I dive into it, I want to talk a little tiny bit about the work that you and I have done over the years, because it's so relevant to this case. So Christy and I both are professional psychic advisors, and we've worked for 15 plus years professionally doing psychic work, and particularly working in realms of paranormal stuff, dark entities, mediumship, really working in that realm that frankly a lot of our colleagues are very uncomfortable in.
That's true. But we're not really afraid of anything, so we take the cases that other people don't want to take.
It's true.
That's been going on for a long time.
Lots of time. People have called both of us frequently and said, yeah, the person I work with told me she doesn't want to do this, so can you deal with it?
That's us, man. That's us.
Yeah. We're brave or stupid or something, but
I don't know. I think we just have the skill set to handle things like that when not everybody does. And I think it's okay. If you don't want to do that kind of work, don't do it. It's all right. But
if you don't want to do that kind of work, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Going into something afraid is not a good plan.
No, definitely not. So, but it makes this case even more, I think, relevant to us. So
yeah.
Anyway, let's get into the actual case. So the case is the Bell Witch. This is the legend of the Bell Witch. Now, bear in mind, this is a legend, okay? This happened allegedly in Tennessee 200 years ago.
Ooh.
And so, And so it is considered to be a legend, which is fine. Lots of legends are based in fact. So one of the things we'll do today in our psychic analysis is kind of dive through what is true here, what isn't.
Yeah.
Is any of it true? What really happened? Yeah. We have a lot to unpack. So before we do that, though, I have to tell you the legend.
So let's hear it.
Yeah. So let's get into the legend first, because this is where this all gets just extremely interesting. So, once upon a time, in the early 1800s, a gentleman named John Bell moved his family from North Carolina to the Red River Bottomlands in Tennessee. This is Robertson County, Tennessee.
Okay.
And he bought a home from the Batt family and a farm. And that's where he and his family were living. He was quite wealthy. They had slaves. They had quite a bit of land. The house itself was not huge, but, for that time it was. They had 3 children. Well, no, they had more than that. Sorry. They had 6 children, I think. At any rate, they had a fairly good-sized family. And John kind of was maybe a questionable guy. There are lots of reports of people having disputes with him over various things, over land, potentially. There's stories that perhaps he moved away from where, and moved here into Tennessee because he was in some trouble or, had some bad dealings. So there's kind of some suspicions around John from the get-go that maybe he wasn't the most stand-up guy.
Okay.
In 1817, he was out inspecting his cornfield, and this animal was sitting in the middle of the corn row. It was enormous, and it looked like it had the head of the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit. It was black and had red eyes. He shot at it several times, and it disappeared. And he didn't think much of it. He figured it must have just run away. He had no idea what it was. Well, after dinner that evening, they started hearing what sounded like someone beating on the outside of their log home. And every time he and his sons would run outside to see what that was, there was nothing there.
Hmm.
So after that time, the sound started increasing quite a bit with a lot more force. And again, they'd run outside to see what it was, nothing. So what sounded like beating on the house, noises like chains shaking or voices from far away, a mysterious kind of cackle, like a laugh. And the kids started waking up claiming that there were rats gnawing on their bedposts, which wasn't actually happening, but that's what it sounded like, that there were rats gnawing on their
Oh,
bedposts.
okay. Okay.
So then, not too long after that, pardon me, the children started complaining of having their bed covers torn off of them in the night and their pillows thrown on the floor. So whatever this energy is just keeps increasing in their energy
Mm-hmm.
and in their attacks on the family. So then they kind of start hearing more voices and the sound of an old woman singing hymns just randomly throughout the day in their house, this disembodied voice of an old woman singing hymns. So at first, for about the first year, John Bell had forbidden his family to talk about it with anybody because he didn't want anyone to think they were crazy. And so we
Okay.
weren't speaking of it, but it was getting worse and worse. And so the youngest daughter, Betsy, the spirit seemed to take a special interest in Betsy. It would pull her hair, it would slap her in the face while she was trying to sleep, pinch her. She'd wake up in the morning sometimes with slap prints, handprints on her face and on her body,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and was quite terrified to sleep in her bed. But they all experienced some of that. And John, particularly, she seemed to target him, beating up on him and doing things to him. There's lots and lots of reports of things like food spilled, like the milk or the cream on the table spilled, someone's coffee being spilled, just being antagonized all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So the voice it got louder and louder until it was unmistakable. And the voice actually would carry on conversations with the Bell family. This voice sang hymns, it quoted scriptures, it carried on intelligent conversations, and at one point actually carried on word for word 2 sermons that were happening at that very time in 2 completely different places, 13 miles apart.
Oh, okay.
So he finally tells his friend, James Johnston, about this. He and his wife come and spend the night at the house, and guess what? The spirit beats the shit out of them all night. So they're
Wow.
believers. So they start
Mm-hmm.
telling other people, and pretty soon they have all kinds of visitors showing up on this farm to try and see what the situation is all about. There's even stories that Andrew Jackson, when he was General Jackson, fought. So apparently some of the boys, so the 3 older boys, John Bell Jr., Drury Bell, and Jesse Bell, all fought under General Jackson. So
Oh, okay.
they had gotten word to him about what was going on here. He decided to come and check it out. He was coming along in a wagon train with some soldiers, and they got at one point to where the wheels on their wagon completely locked up, would not turn
Oh.
for any reason.
Mm-hmm.
And they finally decided that it was the witch. When
They're calling it a witch. So were they calling it a witch at that time? That's the term that was being used?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
So basically, when the public kind of started getting abreast of this, they started calling her the Bell Witch. She actually called herself Kate.
Okay.
So there were a lot of people that thought that she was the spirit of an old woman named Kate Batts. Kate Batts had some business dealings with John Bell, and they were also distantly related through his wife, Lucy. That theory does not hold up in genealogy because Kate Batts she outlived John and Lucy Bell. So doesn't
Yeah.
carry all the weight. They don't.
Doesn't
So
fit
no.
what I'm getting about this either, honestly.
But she called herself Kate. But yeah, that's what they all called her, was the Bell Witch. I don't believe that she ever referred to herself as a witch. This was what people were calling her.
They didn't really have the right terminology, I'm sure.
Right.
A lot of people still don't have the right terminology for things like this. So
definitely. Yep. So at one point, Jackson finally proclaimed, "By the eternal, boys, this must be the Bell Witch." And the legend goes that when he acknowledged her as being the one that had stopped the wagon, she told Jackson that they could proceed and she would see them again later that evening. And that they did.
Wow.
They were able to proceed up to the property. Now, there is another part of this. There is some legends tell that they didn't, that when they decided to turn back, the wagon started working again. So we can talk about that, whether they actually made it there or not. But legend has it that they were able to go up the lane to the Bell home, where Andrew Jackson and John Bell had a long discussion about Indians and other topics while the entourage waited to just see if she would manifest. And later that evening, she did hassle them once they were sleeping. So apparently one of the people that was with Jackson, said that he had a silver bullet in his chamber for her. And she apparently attacked him. And he started jerking around, shrieking, and yelling that he was being poked by pins in every direction. And was actually beaten quite severely. So
a silver bullet, huh? There's a lot of like
crossover
here. Yeah, like
right?
She's not a werewolf or a vampire.
Yeah.
Did she ever manifest visually, or was it always just auditory?
My understanding is it was always auditory.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of where things started. Now, she really hated John, like really hated John. Oh, she talked shit on John all day. She was particularly mean to him. Okay, that's not actually true. There is one time that Betsy Johnson, the youngest, or Betsy Bell, sorry, that there was a little girl hanging from a tree by her hands, just swinging off of a tree in their yard that she'd never seen before. And she asked her if she wanted to play, and she disappeared. So she did. And then, of course, the animal that had manifested as well. So, yeah, it sounds like maybe she did actually show up in some kind of physical form a few times.
But not all the time.
No, most of the time, no. Okay. She really seemed to have a soft spot for the mother, for Lucy Bell. When Lucy was sick, she got really sick at one point, and she gave her, and now how did she give her? They don't say. Supposedly, she brought her grapes and glasses of water and left on her bedside while she was sick. And they didn't have any idea where the grapes came from. But that's a part of the legend. So, but that she was nicer to Lucy. Now, you can't necessarily say she was nice to anybody,
Right.
I mean, she was tormenting this family. But nicer, she seemed to like Lucy at any rate, and really, really hated frickin' John. She called him Old John Bell. So, and we'll get a little further into that. But there was a time when the daughter, Betsy Bell, fell in love with a local kid named Joshua Gardner, and they decided to marry. And their families were thrilled with that. Well, but the Bell Witch was not. She hated Josh. And she would repeatedly beg Betsy, "Don't marry Josh Gardner. Please don't marry Josh Gardner. Please don't marry Josh Gardner." All night long, all day long. Every time she would get together with Josh Gardner to go on a walk or a picnic or anything, she would harass the crap out of them and was basically haunting Josh Gardner and giving him a really hard time. And in the meantime, apparently there had been a school teacher named Richard Powell who had shown a lot of interest in Betsy and told her that he wanted to marry her when she got old enough. So gross, but yeah.
Very.
He was also Joshua Gardner's teacher. Well, The Bell Witch started begging Betsy not to marry Joshua Gardner, but to marry Richard Powell instead. Now, I will say at this point, there are two interesting things about Richard Powell. He was already married to someone in another state, technically, though that person never seemed to show up. He was teaching school here, in Tennessee. But also, there are rumors along the lines of the legend that Richard actually practiced the occult. What did the occult mean 200 years ago? I don't know. Is that true? We'll dig into that. So, at any rate, she finally broke up with Joshua Gardner and married Richard Powell.
Wow.
And when she did that, a lot of the harassment stopped from the Bell Witch. So then we get to John Bell. So she had supposedly had done a lot of things to John Bell physically. Now, again, you kind of still have to go back to that. Okay, but did she, or was this actually what was going on with his health, right? But at any rate, he claimed that she would cause something in his mouth that felt like a sharp stick was wedged in his mouth and he couldn't eat for long periods. Well, something happened. It appears like maybe he had a stroke, but he got really sick and was in bed and died in the night. And when they got up the next morning, there was a bottle, a little like flask of something, a strong smelling liquid next to the bed. And he smelled very strong next to the bed. Or he smelled strongly as well. And it was poison. They didn't know. No one in the family recognized it. They'd never seen it before. The son, John Jr., gave a little of it to the family cat, and it instantly died. Oh, so gosh. Thanks, John, dumbass.
Yeah, right? What are you doing killing cats, jerk?
Right? Like the cat deserved that.
Right?
At any rate, they called the doctor. The doctor examined John. John was dead. And then the Bell Witch started laughing and joyfully celebrating, telling them, I poisoned old John Bell. I did him in. So, wow. And there is apparently on record in Tennessee at this time that she was convicted of killing John Bell. It's the only time in U.S. history that a supernatural force was convicted of a crime.
How interesting that they actually took it that far.
So, and we'll get into that too. How did she do that? Did someone do that at her behest? Like what really happened? But we'll get there. So his funeral drew a lot of people in. Remember that he was wealthy. He had a lot of friends, people around. His funeral was huge. And she harassed the funeral. And as soon as his body was buried, she started singing loudly all kinds of hymns and disembodied stuff and laughing and cheering and basically celebrating the fact that she had killed old John Bell. Well, at that point, she mostly disappeared. They still had some stuff happen around the house, but it wasn't nearly the shenanigans that had been happening. So, some people really believed that taking out John Bell must have really been her whole purpose, stopping that wedding and killing John Bell. She did finally tell John Bell Jr. that she would be back in 7 years. And true to form, she showed back up in 7 years. And she and John Bell Jr. had a lot of conversations. She seemed to come back with a lot less anger or, vindictiveness. They talked about a lot of things. She told him that she would come back in 1934 and visit one of their relatives. And that was it. Did she come and see someone in 1934? There is no record that she did. So maybe she did, but I don't know. We'll talk about that. So that is the legend. Now, there is a cave in that area in Tennessee near that home that the locals claim that she still lives in to this day. And there's lots and lots and lots of reports of people going into that cave and having paranormal experiences. Locals in that area still claim that old Kate Bat is around, or the Bell Witch she's not really Kate Bat, but
Yeah.
that Kate is around, that she still causes shenanigans from time to time. Now it's easy to blame something, right? You wreck your car, that was the Bell Witch, right?
Right,
you,
right.
you, you'll get drunk and get hurt, that was the Bell Witch. I mean, so there's a
Yeah.
lot of, it's thus goes the legend, and so there's lots
Mhm.
and lots of stories of things happening to people that may or may not have been the Bell Witch or some other supernatural force, but that's the basic story. Do
Wow.
you have any questions for me? Did I tell the whole tale?
Um, I don't have any questions. I've got my working theory going, but I don't have any questions.
Okay. Well, I do.
Okay.
So I do have. I will say that sometimes I want to read something. Actually, this is from a gentleman named Godspeed who wrote The History of Tennessee. So he wrote it in 1886. So it's quite a bit after the fact. But this is what he wrote. A remarkable occurrence which attracted widespread interest was connected with the family of John Bell, who settled what is now Adams Station in about 1804. So great was the excitement that people came from hundreds of miles around to witness the manifestations of what was popularly known as the Bell Witch. This witch was supposed to be some spiritual being having the voice and attributes of a woman. It was invisible to the eye, yet would hold conversation and even shake hands with certain individuals. The freaks it performed were wonderful and seemingly designed to annoy the family. Wonderful must have meant something a little different in
Well,
1886.
full of wonder doesn't necessarily mean good.
Yeah, yeah. It would take the sugar from the bowls, spill the milk, take the quilts from the beds, slap and pinch the children, and then laugh at the discomfort of its victims. At first, it was supposed to be a good spirit, but its subsequent acts, together with the curses with which it supplemented its remarks, proved to the contrary. A volume might be written concerning the performance of this wonderful being, as they are now described by contemporaries and their descendants. That is all this that all this actually occurred will not be disputed, nor will be a rational explanation attempted. It is merely introduced as an example of superstition, strong in the minds of all but a few in those times, and not yet wholly extinct. And it still isn't.
Yeah.
But I thought that
Wow.
was a pretty interesting write up about what happened there. Pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
it is.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things to break down here.
Yeah.
So I think the first one we have to break down is, who really was she? We know she wasn't really Kate Batts. I don't really think she was a witch per se. I mean, that's just,
No.
that's how she would have been described at the time. But who really was this entity? What do you think?
My sense is that she was someone that John Bell had an affair with and he killed her. And when
Okay.
he killed her, it was sudden and violent. And sometimes what happens when someone dies suddenly and violently is, number one, they don't cross over because it's unexpected. Also, sometimes what can happen is there can be a soul attachment where a soul that has crossed over becomes attached to a living person. And I feel like this was an attachment to John Bell, that she was
Mm-hmm.
attached to him and that she used that to torment him.
Mm-hmm.
That
So,
she wasn't fully crossed. And she also, the other thing about a soul attachment is that if they're attached to you and you're a living entity and you have a living energy body, they have a lot more energy to work with. They can do more things than most souls who've crossed over, because you'll find that most of those souls that have crossed, they can't do these things. They can't
no.
verbally, speak. They can't appear physically. They lose that ability.
Mm-hmm. Well,
But
that takes an
because
enormous amount of energy.
it does, but because she was attached to him and taking advantage of his energy, she was able to do things that most others who have crossed or who have passed, not crossed, but who have passed
Mm-hmm.
cannot do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, I agree with that entirely. Do you think that the affair happened in North Carolina before they moved?
I do.
That's
Yes.
what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. I think that it happened before they moved. I think it's one of the reasons that they did move on his part, thinking that he could move away from that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And she proved to him that he could never get away from that situation.
Do you think that Kate was a slave?
No.
You don't. You think she was like a lady from their area?
Hmm.
Okay. That is
I
one of the
actually
theories.
think she was a prostitute.
Ah, okay. Okay.
And I do feel like she was white.
Mhm.
She was a white prostitute.
Obviously, there's a lot of speculation about what kind of a person that John Bell was. I really do feel like he was not a great guy. I
Yeah.
mean, what do you think of that?
I agree.
I mean, obviously you're saying that he murdered someone, so yeah,
Yeah, right.
piece of shit. Okay.
Uh-huh. Well, I feel like he was a man who was very full of himself, that he really did believe he
Mhm.
could do whatever he wanted in any situation, that he, the epitome of white male privilege, that he definitely carried that. And
Mhm.
that's how he managed all of his dealings, is that he was 100% out for himself and no one else.
Mhm.
And I feel like and I'm going to call her Kate because I don't like calling her the Bell Witch. I don't like
I know.
calling her a witch because that it's so inaccurate.
Mhm.
Number 1. Number 2, it's that old belief that witches are or whatever, which isn't true.
Mhm.
And then it also is so inaccurate to what she was. This was not witchcraft.
Mhm.
This was a soul attachment.
Right.
And so Kate used this, really uncomfortable experience for her. It's not as though it's a soul attachment is a good thing. It is not.
Right.
But she used that as an opportunity to prove to him over and over again throughout his life that he, in fact, was not all omnipotent and able to do
Yeah.
anything that he wanted to do. She used that against him regularly.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was the only opportunity anybody ever had to take him down a peg.
To really stand him down. Okay. Do you think that he knew?
Yes, I do.
He knew who she was, right?
He knew who she was. He knew the entire time exactly who she was.
Do you think his family ever knew, or do you feel like he
No.
denied that?
I
Yeah.
feel like he denied it. I feel like he blamed everything on her, put a lot of what happened off on this situation and used it to his advantage in whatever
Mhm.
way that he could. I don't feel that they had any idea who she was.
Mhm. I can only imagine, and there's not a lot written on this, or maybe there is that I didn't see it. There's been a lot written on this. There's been several movies made. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a very famous case.
Yeah.
Uh, but it makes me wonder if, or not if, but I'm sure, what kind of exorcisms, 'cause surely clergy from all over the place showed up at this house to beat the Bell Witch,
Mhm. Mhm.
and yet obviously no one was effective.
Well, here's the thing. I feel like if that did happen, that they were treating her as a demon, as an evil entity to be
Yeah.
removed,
Hmm.
and those practices are not. Well, I don't think they're effective anyway. I have my own opinions and my own skills about how to handle those things, but
Hmm.
she wasn't evil. What she needed was to be unattached and assisted in crossing over, and I highly
Yeah.
doubt that anybody at that time did that for her. And it's
Yeah.
why when he died, then
Hmm.
things settled down so much because she could move beyond him.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
She was no longer attached.
Yeah.
That's also why her anger abated. It's why it wasn't so intense after he died because she no longer had his energy to function from.
Yeah. Okay. So Powell, do we think Powell was actually an occultist?
Um
He didn't have anything to do with
I
this.
he didn't have anything to do with it. I do feel like he was studying some kind of spiritualism. I'm feeling like more like, Ouija and, mediumship kinds of
Hmm.
things were going on with him. Yes, I don't feel he had anything to do with it. But this was a time when those kinds of things were very feared and not understood at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Not that they're much different
have we
now,
changed
sadly.
so much?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right. I agree with that. All right. So, I mean, obviously, it is called a legend. There are plenty that believe that this is just that. It's just a story. Do we believe that something happened to
Mhm.
John Bell and happened in that home?
I do, I do. I feel like there are lots of parts of it that are blown up and bigger and, it's been turned into a legendary story, but do I feel
Sure.
like this actual thing happened? I do.
Mhm.
I do feel that he did kill her. I feel she attached to him. I do feel that she tormented him
Mhm.
until the end of his life.
Do you think that she's still lurking around Adams, Tennessee?
No.
I don't either.
She's gone. She's finally managed to cross over.
However, I do think that the level of paranormal activity there and interest in it has opened the door to a lot of paranormal activity there, all
Mhm,
of which she has been blamed for, most of
mhm.
which she didn't do.
Right. It's
The
just
cave,
awareness. It brought up awareness of
yeah,
other things.
yeah. The cave, I think, is of particular interest. Obviously, she was a spirit. She didn't have to go live in a cave. She wasn't
Mhm,
living anywhere,
mhm,
But I do think it's interesting that even now people claim that they've had, terrifying experiences in that cave.
mhm,
And I suspect that they have had, terrifying
mhm.
experiences in that cage. That cave. I just don't think that they were the spirit of Kate. I
No.
suspect that they were other things. When you go looking for something, you're probably going to find it,
Right. If you open yourself up to spiritual activity, it is everywhere. It is all around us. We are
Mhm.
just mostly numb to it, you
Yeah.
know? And you and I know from the work that we've done that, if someone kind of opens themselves up to it, then they might
Mhm.
discover that they have something really weird going on in their house and maybe it's always been there, but they just weren't sensitive to it until
Yeah.
they really started being open to that connection.
Yeah. She did come back in 7 years and did
Mhm.
converse for a short time. It was just only I think it was only a few days that
Mhm.
she visited with John Bell Jr.
Yeah.
It's my take on that by that time, she had finally crossed over.
Yeah.
Though she did come back, it feels to me more like because these were actually, like, congenial, conversations.
Mhm.
Now the legend reads, pardon me, that she actually, predicted a bunch of things that did happen. Other historians say that's actually not true. You can take that with a grain of salt.
I feel like that's part of the sensationalism that happened with this
Yeah.
story. I wouldn't be surprised if she did come back though, because she did a lot of terrible things when she still,
Mhm,
before she crossed and still had some of her human ego and the
mhm,
desire for revenge. She did some bad stuff and she hurt
mhm.
people who didn't really deserve it. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
going to say John Bell didn't deserve it, but the rest of them didn't.
Right.
And I do feel like after having crossed, you and I both know that after people cross and you drop your ego,
Mhm.
everything looks different to you. And I feel like she
Yeah.
had a desire to change things a bit
Mhm.
and to make some kind of amends for
Mhm.
some of the things that she'd done.
I agree with that. I actually feel like she stayed pretty close actually, in my opinion, to both to Lucy and to the daughter throughout
Mhm.
their lives, in a different capacity. Yeah, because
Mhm.
once she crossed over, she would probably come back to them more, kind of as a guide
Right.
in a sense. I mean, she wasn't one of their guides, but and
Mhm.
I do think that particularly, that she watched over them, and
Yeah.
actually over time became more of a protector
Yeah.
than an antagonist.
Mhm. I agree that she made some connections during that time. It was just like protecting the daughter, not wanting her to marry the one guy. I feel like that was legitimate. She had concern for her, that there was a safety issue there that maybe wasn't well known, but
Mhm.
that was in fact real, and that
Yeah.
she was trying to protect her. That in
Mhm.
all of this, she still had her ability to empathize, and, I feel like over time, even though she was there for revenge, that, she couldn't help but get connected to the people that she was spending so
Uh-huh.
much time around.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like she had fits of rage.
Yeah.
And I had felt like maybe she would attack the children and beat up on them. Yeah, obviously as revenge to John that she was going to do this to his kids. But yeah, I
Mhm.
agree. I think she got attached to them, particularly the youngest daughter,
Yeah.
Betsy, and just really, you know, yeah, was invested in her
Mhm.
by the end of all of this.
Yeah.
Did she come back in 1935? Did she even really say she was going to come back in 1935? What do you
I
think of that?
I don't feel like she did. I
I
really
don't either.
feel her fully moved on.
Hmm.
This was a short-lived period for her, a very difficult time after her passing
Yeah.
that she's moved on from, and it is she's really no longer connected to this at all.
Yeah. I agree with that totally. I felt like she would have no need to.
Yeah.
You know, I suspect that though she did come and talk to John Jr., that yeah, again, like you said, some of it's just sensationalism. I wonder if he too blew some of it up to keep some of that attention going.
Mhm.
You know, there are certainly those who think that none of this was really happening, but they were just, getting people to come to their farm, to why, I don't know. Were they charging them? Or I don't know that. Were they, you know,
Mhm.
profiting in some way? Was this all about getting attention? I don't think that's true. Because I do think it happened. And when you look back into the historical documents, there's a website that is the bellwitch.org
Mhm.
that is a historian. It's bellwitch.org. He is a historian who has studied this up one side and down the other and has a lot of really good information. His name is Fitzhugh. Pat Fitzhugh. And he has probably done the most intense investigative work, really dug into all different aspects like public records and genealogy and, tracking down journals. And, his work is probably the most valued and valuable around this. So if you're interested in
Mhm.
this case, go to his website, to bellwitch.org, because there's so much good information there. But
Good to
at
know.
any rate, and he's not there to prove or disprove. He's there to tell the story and then, provide all of the historical documentation that he can, which is actually a lot. So, anyway, very interesting stuff. So, in the town to this day, like we said, there is still some level of paranormal activity. I watched a documentary this morning. They were interviewing a gal that owns a restaurant there, a little diner there, that at one point was called the Bell Witch Diner. It isn't anymore, but uh, because this has become like a huge touristy thing. People come and go to the
Sure.
cave, and they come and see all the stuff, and it's this little frontier town that it's of interest, right? If we lived
Mhm.
closer, I would definitely go there,
Sure.
But anyway, she said, "Oh yeah, she's been here before and thrown things and created havoc." And we just said, "Bell Witch, we don't have time for you," and she left. Which I thought was so great. So,
That's really
but
great.
yeah, it that does seem to be a bit of a hotbed of paranormal activity, which
Mhm.
is quite interesting.
Well, and there are hotbeds of paranormal activity all over the country. I mean, that's
Mhm.
not actually that unusual. There
Yeah.
are plenty of places that have activity like that,
Mhm.
there are portals probably in that area where there are lots of spirits coming and
Mhm.
going and,
Yep.
so yeah, you have this story to blame it on, but in reality, there's lots more, there than has been really, investigated.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Well, and they feel comfortable talking about it, you
Yeah.
know? I mean,
Mhm.
you sit down with practically anybody, and if you can get them to be vulnerable enough with you, they will tell you a ghost story,
Yes.
about themselves or their grandma or, someone in their family that has seen or experienced something. Everybody has them. Not
Yeah.
everybody tells them, but
But
everybody has
everybody
them.
has them. Yeah, it's very
Mhm.
true, and it got normalized when the Bell Witch
Uh-huh.
situation was going on there, and so it
Mhm.
does make sense to me that more people share the stories, that people are more honest about it, not afraid.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. So, very, very interesting tale. And again, if you really want to research it hard, there's so much out there. But we
Mhm.
just wanted to, tell the basic legend. And I probably missed some pieces because there are so many of them.
Mm.
But that's the basic legend and, our basic take on it. So it's a very interesting case. It's kind of fun to get to dip into something so paranormal.
Yeah. Well, and
Oh,
I
I'm
have
not done. Oh, go
oh,
ahead.
well, I have one more, hit that I wanted to share
Yes, please.
about his death.
That's
Were you thinking
exactly
the
where I
same?
was going back to. Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay, so I don't feel that she actually killed him, I do feel that she drove him to kill himself. I feel like he had
Oh,
finally had enough, that she really
mhm.
truly had been pushing him toward, his own demise for a long time, and that he finally had had enough and that he poisoned himself.
Okay.
But it certainly wasn't she wasn't innocent in that at all, in that she pushed him
Oh, no, she
to that
caused
place.
it. Yeah.
She knew all along that he knew who she was,
Uh-huh.
and I feel she used that
Mhm.
and used that to torment him, until he finally couldn't take it anymore.
I'm going to take that one step further and say that I think that the poison itself that the family claimed they'd never seen before, they'd never seen that bottle, they didn't know what it was. I think he bought it. I think he'd had it for a while and had it stashed somewhere, and that he knew exactly what it was and what he was going to or maybe eventually use it for, or think about using for. Hell, maybe it's what he used on her.
Right. I don't know. My sense of it is that he strangled her. I have a very clear sensation of being choked relating to her death.
Yeah. Well, I think that he bought that poison and had it.
I do too. I feel like this was a thought for a long time for him. That this would be his only way out.
Well, what an enormous amount of guilt and fear, in knowing that he was being punished and that his family was being punished for something he did.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, his capacity to feel guilt, I mean,
Not great.
in his, and in his
more about his own torment than anything, and being found out. I feel like he was very afraid of being found out, and being prosecuted for her death, and the truth of where this all started coming from.
Yeah, for sure. Whew. Well,
quite a story.
Go. Well, and I'm with you. We will never call her the Bell Witch again, because she really wasn't a witch.
No, not at all.
Or, a witch of the whatever variety. I don't even know what to say about that.
Yeah, no, she wasn't a witch at all. But I understand in that timing that, anything that they thought of as bad or evil was a witchcraft.
Assigned a witch. Yeah. So, well, that is it for this podcast. Now, we're actually doing double duty today, because we're going to be publishing 2 this week, which is kind of fun.
Well, this one will be going up on our Patreon.
Yes.
So, those of you that are hearing it are our patrons.
Yeah, you're receiving. This is a bonus track. Yeah. So our main track this week is a scratching the surface of the missing Vallow Ryan children. And this is a case that I've talked about quite a bit, and we're going to start scratching the surface of it. So definitely watch for that over on our YouTube and in our podcasts as well. But this is a bonus track for people that are patrons. So I hope that you have enjoyed it. And I don't know what else to say about that, except for that. Thank you. Right?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All righty. Well, then I'm going to let us all go. So you have been listening to True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. Take care.
Bye, everybody.